On June 22, 1941, as German bombs rained down on Soviet cities and Hitler's forces poured across the border, 25-year-old Lyudmila Pavlichenko made a decision that would have been unthinkable in almost any other nation. The history student from Kiev walked into a military recruitment office and demanded to fight, not as a nurse, not as a support worker, but as a sniper on the front lines. The recruiting officer looked at her skeptically. "Women belong in hospitals," he said, pushing enlistment papers for the medical corps across the desk. Pavlichenko pulled out her shooting club certificates and marksmanship badges. When that wasn't enough, she was taken to a rifle range and told to prove herself. She picked up a Mosin Nagant rifle and hit every target. The next day, she was given a uniform and sent to Odessa. What the recruiting officer didn't know, what the world didn't know, was that Pavlichenko was about to become one of the deadliest snipers in military history, and she would not be alone. Thousands of Soviet women would follow her path, armed with scoped rifles and an unbending determination to stop the Nazi invasion. Among them was a young woman named Roza Shanina, whose story would become a testament to courage, heartbreak, and the ultimate sacrifice.
The decision to train women as combat snipers was born from desperation. In the first 6 months of Operation Barbarossa, the Soviet Union suffered catastrophic losses, over 3 million soldiers killed, wounded, or captured. Entire armies were encircled and destroyed. The Germans advanced hundreds of miles, reaching the outskirts of Moscow and Leningrad. Stalin's regime faced an existential crisis. Unlike Britain, America, or Germany, where women were relegated to support roles, the Soviet Union made a radical choice. They would arm women and send them to the front, not just in token numbers, but by the thousands. This decision was partly ideological. The communist state had long promoted gender equality, but mostly practical. They were running out of men. In total, 2,484 women would be trained as snipers during the war. But the selection process was rigorous. Candidates needed sharp eyesight, steady nerves, patience, and an aptitude for mathematics to calculate distance and wind. Soviet military doctrine held that women possessed natural advantages: better patience for long waits, smaller profiles for concealment, and more delicate trigger control. The Central Women's School of Sniper Training was established near Moscow in 1943, though individual units had been training female snipers since 1941. The training was brutal, 3 months of dawn to dusk drilling. The recruits learned ballistics, camouflage techniques, counter-sniper tactics, and how to remain motionless for hours. They practiced shooting in rain, snow, and darkness. Many washed out. Those who graduated were issued the standard Soviet sniper weapon, a Mosin Nagant 1891-30 rifle with a 3.5x PU scope. Lyudmila Pavlichenko had been preparing for this war without knowing it. Born in 1916 in Ukraine, she had moved to Kyiv at 14, enrolling in a sharpshooter club after hearing a boy boast about his shooting skills. She described herself as a tomboy who enjoyed proving that girls could be just as good as boys, if not better. By the time war broke out, she had earned her Voroshilov sharpshooter badge and was studying history at Kyiv University. But Pavlichenko's life wasn't as simple as Soviet propaganda would later claim. She had married at 15, had a son named Rostislav, and quickly divorced. Her parents raised the child, while she worked at an arms factory and studied. When the Germans invaded, she immediately volunteered, leaving behind her 4-year degree, her son, and the peaceful life she had been building. On her first day at the front near Odessa, Pavlichenko found herself paralyzed by fear when a German soldier appeared in her sights. She couldn't pull the trigger. A young Russian soldier set up position beside her. Then a German bullet killed him, right next to her. The shock snapped her into action. He was such a nice, happy boy, she later recalled, and he was killed just next to me. After that, nothing could stop me. That day, she killed her first 2 German scouts. The kills went into her tally book. Every sniper kept one. Over the next 2.5 months defending Odessa, she recorded 187 confirmed kills. Each kill required verification by a spotter or officer. When Odessa fell to Romanian forces in October 1941, her unit evacuated by sea to Sevastopol in Crimea.
Sevastopol would become Pavlichenko's crucible. The siege lasted 8 brutal months from October 1941 to July 1942. The city was pounded by artillery, bombed from the air, and assaulted by wave after wave of German and Romanian infantry. It was in this cauldron of death that Pavlichenko truly became Lady Death. The most dangerous work was counter-sniping, dueling with German sharpshooters who were hunting her just as she hunted them. It required psychological warfare, patience, and nerves of steel. Pavlichenko would lie motionless for hours, sometimes all night, waiting for a target to make a single mistake. With her partner, snipers always worked in pairs, she destroyed German observation posts and regularly fought duels with enemy snipers. The Germans began to take notice. Loudspeakers blared across no man's land. "Lyudmila Pavlichenko, come over to us. We will give you lots of chocolate and make you a German officer." When bribes didn't work, they turned to threats. "If we catch you, we will tear you into 309 pieces and scatter them to the winds." Pavlichenko was pleased. They had her kill count exactly right. By May 1942, her confirmed kill count had reached 257, earning her official commendation from the Southern Army Council. Of those kills, 36 were enemy snipers, highly trained marksmen sent specifically to eliminate her. She had been wounded 4 separate times but refused to leave the front. Then, in June 1942, a mortar shell exploded near her position, sending shrapnel into her face and legs. When she was injured, Soviet High Command ordered her evacuation from Sevastopol by submarine. Her fighting days were over. Final tally, 309 confirmed kills. At just 25 years old, Pavlichenko had become the most successful female sniper in history. But the Soviet leadership had new plans for her. She would become a weapon of propaganda. In August 1942, with the Battle of Stalingrad raging, Stalin needed something from the Western Allies, a second front in Europe to relieve pressure on Soviet forces. President Roosevelt invited a Soviet student delegation to tour America, and Pavlichenko was chosen to lead it. She became the first Soviet citizen ever received at the White House. The American press didn't know what to make of her. Journalists asked if Russian women could wear makeup at the front, what brand of cigarettes they smoked, and criticized the length of her skirt, saying American women wore shorter skirts and her uniform made her look fat. The papers called her the girl sniper. They treated her like a curiosity, not a combat veteran who had killed more enemy soldiers than most American companies. Pavlichenko's response was sharp. "I wear the uniform and the Order of Lenin on it with pride. It is covered with blood that has been shed in battles. For American women, it is more important whether there's silk underwear under the uniform. They have yet to learn the values that the Soviet military uniform embodies." But in Chicago, something changed. Standing before a crowd of thousands, Pavlichenko asked, "Gentlemen, I am 25 years old and I have killed 309 fascist invaders by now. Don't you think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" The crowd erupted. She had found her voice, and America was listening. Eleanor Roosevelt took Pavlichenko under her wing, and the two formed an unlikely friendship.
The First Lady toured the country with the young sniper, introducing her to massive audiences. Pavlichenko spoke at rallies, union halls, and universities. The folk singer Woody Guthrie wrote a song about her. She was given a Winchester rifle in Toronto and a Colt pistol by the U.S. government. Workers in Coventry, England, raised over £4,500 to buy X-ray units for the Red Army. While Pavlichenko toured America, a 17-year-old kindergarten teacher in the frozen north of Russia was making plans of her own. Roza Shanina had been born in April 1924 in the tiny village of Lyudmila near the White Sea. Her mother was a milkmaid, her father a disabled World War I veteran who worked as a logger. The family was poor, but Roza was determined. After finishing elementary school in her village, Shanina walked 8 miles back and forth every day to attend middle school in the nearest town of Bereznik. Later, she would walk 120 miles alone to reach Arkhangelsk, where she enrolled in college and trained as a kindergarten teacher. Roza was bright, ambitious, and headstrong, qualities that would define her short life. In December 1941, a death notification arrived for her 19-year-old brother Mikhail, killed during the siege of Leningrad. 2 more of her brothers would also die in the war. Devastated by Mikhail's death, Roza immediately went to the military commissariat and demanded permission to serve. They told her no, she was too young, too valuable as a teacher. She persisted. She wrote letters. She appealed to higher authorities. Finally, in June 1943, the army relented. Roza was accepted into the Central Women's School of Sniper Training. There she met 2 women who would become her closest friends, Alexandra Yakimova and Kaleria Petrova. The 3 formed what they called the Troika, a trio bound by training, shared danger, and a determination to avenge their fallen loved ones. Shanina graduated with honors and was offered a position as an instructor. She refused. She wanted to fight. On April 2, 1944, Shanina joined the 184th Rifle Division and was appointed commander of a female sniper platoon. 3 days later, she made her first kill. According to her own words, recorded by a war correspondent, her legs gave way after pulling the trigger. "I've killed a man," she said as she slid down into the trench. Her comrades rushed over. "That was a fascist you finished off." Shanina quickly overcame her initial shock. Within days, she was hunting Germans with cold efficiency. Between April 6th and 11th, she killed 13 enemy soldiers while under artillery and machine gun fire. For this action, she became the first servicewoman of the 3rd Belarusian Front to receive the Order of Glory 3rd class. But what made Shanina truly exceptional was her mastery of the doublet, 2 kills in rapid succession. She was capable of precisely hitting enemy personnel and making doublets, hitting 2 targets with 2 rounds fired in quick succession. This technique required extraordinary reflexes and marksmanship. During the liberation of Vilnius, she demonstrated this skill repeatedly, racking up 12 kills during that single battle. By May 1944, her confirmed tally had reached 17 kills. On June 9th, her portrait appeared on the front page of the Soviet newspaper Untold Vraga, Destroy the Enemy. She was becoming famous. A Canadian newspaper described her as the unseen terror of East Prussia. Press articles urged others to follow the example of Roza Shanina, 1 cartridge, 1 fascist.
What no one knew was that Roza was breaking one of the strictest rules in the Red Army. Although it was strictly forbidden within the Soviet military to keep a combat diary, Shanina managed to maintain hers throughout the last 4 months of her life. In 3 thick notebooks, she recorded everything: the terror, the tedium, the friendships, and the losses. The diary reveals a complex young woman, far removed from the propaganda posters.
She wrote about lost love, a man named Misha Panarin who was killed in action. "I can't accept that Misha Panarin doesn't live anymore. What a good guy. He has been killed. He loved me, I know, and I him. My heart is heavy." She was 20 years old and had already experienced more death than most people witness in a lifetime. But Shanina's biggest frustration wasn't the danger, it was being kept from it. When Operation Bagration commenced in June 1944, Soviet policy dictated that female snipers be withdrawn from the heaviest fighting. Shanina and her friends refused to comply. She wrote to her war correspondent friend, Pyotr Molchanov, begging, "If you knew how passionately I want to be with the fighters at the front and kill Nazis." When requests failed, she went AWOL. She would simply run to the front lines and start shooting. One Soviet war photographer described her as a tall, slender girl with smiling eyes who wouldn't agree to be photographed unless her friends could be in it too. Her commanders didn't know whether to court-martial her or commend her. Usually, they did both. By late 1944, the Red Army had pushed deep into East Prussia, German territory. The fighting grew more vicious as Nazi forces defended their homeland with fanatical determination. Shanina's final confirmed kill count would reach 59, including 12 enemy snipers. But the diary entries from this period grew darker. November 1, 1944. "I am going to remember this war. This town switched hands 4 times, and 3 times I just barely slipped through the Nazis' fingers." On January 14, 1945, just 2 weeks before her death, she wrote, "My definition of happiness is fighting for others. If I must, for general happiness, fall, I am ready." In her final diary entry, she wrote that German fire had intensified and she believed she might be killed soon. Humble, even facing death, she added, "What I've actually done? No more than I have to as a Soviet person, having stood up to defend the motherland." On January 27, 1945, during the East Prussian offensive, Shanina's unit came under heavy artillery fire. She was killed while shielding a severely wounded artillery commander. When 2 Russian officers found her body, she was slumped over the officer, hands still gripping her rifle. Roza Shanina was 20 years old. She never saw the victory she had fought for. Shanina was far from alone in her sacrifice. Of the 2,484 Soviet women who served as snipers, only about 500 survived the war, a mortality rate of 80%. By comparison, male Soviet snipers had a survival rate of around 50%. The women were given the most dangerous assignments, from counter-sniper duels to infiltration missions deep behind enemy lines. Some became legends. Nina Petrova, a 48-year-old physical education instructor, started as a frontline nurse, but convinced commanders to let her snipe in her free time. She accumulated over 100 confirmed kills and became an instructor. At age 52, she was awarded the full Cavalier of the Order of Glory, the second woman to receive this honor. Months later, she died when her truck fell off a bridge. The grandmother never made it home to see her granddaughter. Nina Lobkovskaya fought through the Battle of Stalingrad and made it all the way to Berlin, where she was among the Soviet troops who stormed the Reichstag. She survived, earned a history degree from Moscow State University, and worked at the Central Lenin Museum. Others weren't so fortunate. Maria Polivanova and Natalya Kovshova, a spotter-sniper team, were killed together in 1943 when their position was overrun. Rather than surrender, they detonated their grenades. When Lyudmila Pavlichenko returned to the Soviet Union after her propaganda tour, she never went back to combat. She was promoted to major and spent the rest of the war training new snipers, passing her deadly skills to the next generation. In 1943, she was awarded the Gold Star of the Hero of the Soviet Union and received the Order of Lenin twice. After the war ended, Pavlichenko completed her history degree at Kiev University and worked as a researcher for Soviet Navy headquarters. But the war never left her. Like so many veterans, she battled what we now call PTSD, though Soviet medicine had no such diagnosis. She suffered from depression and the lasting effects of her multiple wounds. In 1957, 15 years after their propaganda tour, Eleanor Roosevelt visited Moscow during a Soviet tour. The former First Lady insisted on visiting her old friend Lyudmila. Despite Cold War tensions and Soviet minders, the two women found a moment to slip away, laugh, and reminisce about the summer of 1942 when they had traveled America together. Lyudmila Pavlichenko died on October 10, 1974, from a stroke at age 58. Her numerous combat injuries had taken their toll. She was buried in Moscow's prestigious Novodevichy Cemetery, her son Rostislav beside her. 2 Soviet commemorative stamps were issued in her honor, one in 1943 during her lifetime and another in 1976 after her death.